So, not your best practice. Can we agree on that?
Parents, let's talk about the car ride home. In a poll conducted by the National Alliance for Youth Sport, an estimated 70% of kids will stop playing their sport by the age of 13. Wow. An even bigger wow is that the leading cause of those kids quitting their sport, well, it's their parents. Now, I've been around youth sport for almost a decade, and whenever I ask kids who are considering quitting their sport because they say that they don't enjoy it anymore, I ask them, well, what's your least favorite part of your sport? The vast majority of them, unfortunately, have said it's the car ride home. So in this video, I'm going to give you 3 incredibly powerful reasons to not talk about the game with your athlete on the ride home. I'm going to talk about those 3 reasons here in just a second, but since we're on the topic of helping your athletes better handle stress and pressure and adversity, I have a free gift for you that I think is really going to help. If you get over to trainwithpert.com/free guide, you're going to find 3 really easy to install tools for your athletes to help them better prepare mentally for their next big moment. Again, that's trainwithpert.com/free guide. All right, reason number 1 is that emotions are simply too high for both athlete and parent to have anything productive come from a conversation about the game. Let's talk about the impact of those emotions on the athlete. After a game where the athlete either didn't play well or didn't get to play at all, the emotions such as disappointment, discouragement, frustration, and even anger are going to be at an all-time high. Now, when that young athlete is emotionally activated, that emotional control center of the brain is just going nuts. And that emotional control center lies right next door to another powerful brain function, the fight or flight response. That fight or flight response has one job in the human brain, and that is to scan the world for threats. So it's incredibly likely that when your athlete's mind is in this state, that athlete is going to interpret any sort of criticism or critique or evaluation from you as a threat. It's going to be a threatening experience for them. So any parent that starts to levy their opinion on their athlete's performance when that athlete is in this mental state is about the equivalent of, let's say you have a fear of spiders and you're placed in a room where you're expected to listen and pay attention to a lecture and get something from it, and all of a sudden you see a spider run across the floor. You're probably going to run from the room. Only for your athletes, it's worse. They can't run from the car. If you've ever seen the video of Snoop Dogg narrating that iguana running from all those snakes, your athlete in that situation feels like the iguana. Nobody wants to be the iguana. I think it's also safe to say that those same emotions of frustration and disappointment and even anger can absolutely influence how the parent approaches the car ride home, and this simply just doesn't put that parent in a position to have success. If you've learned something from that first reason, hit the like button for me right now. Reason number 2 for not talking to your athlete about the game on the car ride home is because of how it influences how the athlete thinks the parent values them. The unfortunate reality is that for many young athletes, they're miserable in their sport because they're so afraid of how their parents are going to think about them. And even on a deeper level, they're afraid of how their parents are going to value them depending on how they play. Now, this attack on the athlete's sense of self-worth most likely stems from the inconsistency that they see from their parents depending on if they have a really good game or a really bad game. This could be a parent whose attitude or mood is dramatically different based on how the athlete does. It could also be something as subtle as body language. I've had athletes tell me that if they have a bad game, their parents won't even look at them. Another common inconsistency is the tone of voice that the parent may use depending on a good game versus a bad game. A not so subtle inconsistency is whether or not certain rewards or privileges will be available to the athlete if they play well. Any of these inconsistencies are going to tell the athlete one thing: you are only worthy and valuable if you play and play well. If you've gotten useful information at this point in the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button for me right now. Now, reason number 3 comes from the fact that unfortunately, many young athletes do still find themselves in these situations where they're incredibly emotionally activated and yet their parents are coming down on them because of their poor performance. This triggers two very common defense mechanisms that I call the two P's: pessimism and perfectionism. Because the fact is that when a young athlete finds themselves in these situations time and time again, their own mind is going to come up with some sort of defense mechanism to try and protect themselves from ever experiencing the pain of that moment again. Perfectionism is the most common one, and this looks like an athlete who's adopted a mindset that says, I need to play perfect and not make a single mistake, otherwise mom and dad are going to yell at me. If there is one thing that I see a ton of in this generation of young athletes, is the dramatic rise in perfectionism. And no, it's not always because of the parents, but understand that if an athlete finds themselves in this kind of situation, they're probably more likely then to adopt some sort of perfectionistic tendency, because to them, they think that if they can just be perfect, they're not going to feel the pain and discomfort of this situation on the ride home anymore. The other mindset that serves as a defense mechanism for the young athlete is pessimism. Now, pessimism is simply directing negativity towards the future, or just fundamentally thinking that it's far more likely that something bad is going to happen in their next performance than something good. For an athlete, this looks like them thinking, well, it doesn't really matter how I play, because regardless of how I play, mom and dad are going to find something to yell at me about on the way home. Perfectionism and pessimism are incredibly detrimental to an athlete's mindset and overall mental health. They tend to be two of the main side effects of athletes who have miserable car rides home, and they also tend to be two of the biggest reasons why athletes end up wanting to quit. All right, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel. And if you haven't already, get over to trainwithpert.com/free guide. I'll see you next week.